Good morning. Welcome to Hoop City. I'm with Josh Fenwick. Josh, how are you today?
I'm doing very, very well, Paul. Last day at the old bar last night, so I'm feeling good. It's a big weight off the old shoulders, so feeling good.
And just for our listeners and viewers, it's not because Josh is always going to the bar. It's a job.
It was a job. Yes, I'm all done. My days of getting a paycheck from working at a bar, and I'm quite amped up about it.
Well, and the great thing is that means you're going to be spending more time here at Sports 1440.
Oh yeah. I'll married to my work. Is that how we'll say this? I'll be married to my work for a long time.
Well, it's great to have you here, and really excited about the show today. Our playlist. By the way, you can listen online on YouTube. Josh sent out a great X post. It has a link directly to YouTube. It also has a link to listen to us online if you're not in the listening area for our live broadcast today. I'm so glad you're with us today. And, of course, after the show is over, all of the content on the show is available on your favorite podcast network. Our text line is 833-401-1440. Again, 833-401-1440. We welcome any and all comments, questions, and insights from you. We get lots of great insights. My playlist today, Paul's playlist, is Best Rock and Pop Love Songs. So we've got some pretty schmaltzy, syrupy stuff. You know, Josh, I was thinking about doing edgy love songs, and so I went online and started to get a selection. And I go, you know what? They're really edgy, and they're just a little too edgy for me. So I'm going to go back to my comfort zone. We'll do we're going to do more sugar-coated cotton candy stuff. So, Josh, how about our poll question for the day?
Yeah, our poll question for the day is, should the NBA immediately change the 65-game requirement for MVP voting? Potential exclusives from the MVP balloting include SGA, Luka, Giannis, and Jokic. So should they change it? Yes or no? It's on our X, Hoop City Show, at Hoop City Show. So go out there and check that out.
Yeah, I think it's a relevant question because now with SGA's injury forcing him to take off significant time, and he still may very well meet the 65-game requirement, but there's so many injuries happening right now, and the intent of the rule for the 65 games was to prevent teams from the dreaded resting of key players when they weren't hurt, but they just wanted to rest them. It all started, I think, primarily as a formal strategy with Greg Popovich and the Spurs with Kawhi Leonard back in the day when the Spurs were battling year after year for titles. So this was not the intention. And you also have a minutes requirement, I believe, in there, Josh. It's not just 65 games. It's also...
You have to play 20 minutes, minimum of 20 minutes in those games.
Yeah, so and you could actually exceed the number of minutes in total, but not play the number of games that you need. And when you start talking about players that are impacting the game in the way that they are, I would say this is a critical decision that I think should be made, but I doubt will be made because in fairness to the NBA and Adam Silver, to change a policy like that as the season goes on, that's tough. But on the other hand, when you've got a potential for these top athletes, and I mean the top 4 candidates for MVP being out through no fault of their own. And also, and here's something that I'd like your feedback on, Josh.
Sure.
Also, like in the case of Jokic, he's still not himself. And I wonder, did he come back a bit early because of this requirement? I'm only speculating that might enter into the thinking that went into Jokic's return. It also could be that he's just a competitor. And by the way, we have a very interesting guest that I'll tell you about in a little bit about Jokic being from Serbia and Serbian basketball in general. But what are your thoughts on that?
I mean, like, I can see where you're coming from, but also it was an hyperextension of his knee. Once you're you're better. Like, you're not that much better. Speaking as a guy who'd never hyperextended his knee, but has been watching the NBA for a while, it's like it's gonna take a while for him to come back to 100%. So once he was at like 75% or 80, he's like, yeah, I'm good to come back. Like, we'll get that 100% eventually. And also, Nikola Jokic at 80% of his max power is still so much better than other guys in the NBA. Well, it's an unfair advantage.
And you know what? That's really a great point, because I think that that's where two principles collide, because one of the criticisms of athletes in the NBA right now is they don't play hurt. And when you listen to the old school guys, they're talking about they're practically dragging broken legs around the court, just being able to compete, and that the modern athlete is too soft. So I think you make a valid point. Anyway, I think it's an interesting poll question, and I'll look forward to what our listeners have to say. Yes or no? Should the NBA immediately change the 65-game requirement for MVP voting? We also have our NBA Legends contest for a T-shirt. And this is how it works. I want you to tell us which NBA legend you would like to talk about. And we're not just talking about the high-profile stars from the past. The requirement is that they are not playing today. So they're no longer in the league. So what NBA legend would you like to discuss today? Text your suggestion into 1-833-401-1440. We will select it at the top of the hour, and then we will send you a T-shirt. We need to get your size or your mailing address, but we will then talk about that in our final segment today. Okay, show lineup today. Alan Horton, play-by-play voice of the Minnesota Timberwolves, is going to be with us talking about the new acquisition of Ayo Dosunmu and the impact that that's going to have on the Wolves for the rest of the season. Are the Wolves performing up to expectations, or do they have a ways to go and improvements to make? Ryan Wolstat, beat writer for the Toronto Raptors for the Toronto Sun, will be joining us. We're going to talk about the inactivity in the recent draft by the Raptors. Was that the right way to go, to stick with this lineup, with this talent pool for the remainder of the year, which I think by all estimates has been very successful to this point. We also have on our community champion this week. Her name is Samantha Ringette. Samantha is a local coach in high school, also in club in 3x3. Samantha is a real dynamo and making a huge impact, particularly for young girls, young women in our community. And then we have a former player of mine at Concordia University, Milos Prijovic. And as you can guess by his name, Milos is Eastern European. He is from Serbia. He played junior college basketball down in the United States, came to Concordia, became an all-Canadian, outstanding player. And what we want to talk to Milos about in our deep dive today is why Serbia? How can Serbia continue to produce such high-level athletes in a country that is so small? It's about a third the size of Canada's population. It's around 10 million, and they continue to pump out athletes like Nikola Jokic. Their national team should have beaten the Americans in the Paris Olympics. They did everything but beat them. So we're going to talk to Milos about that in our last conversation segment. So let's jump to 3 plus 1 today.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, number 1. I want to hear some rankings from for your early trade results. How are you feeling? Harden, Dosunmu, Alvarado, Zubac, all of them. How are you feeling?
Harden is a big plus. I did a blog recently, and I gave that trade an A+. In the reason it's very early, of course. It's only been a couple of games. But what you can see is the level of player that James Harden is. For a couple of years in his career, Harden was the best player in the NBA. He averaged over 37 points a game. But beyond that, as he now is 37 years old, with James Harden, you've got a guy who's a tremendous passer, but he can still break down his defender when you need to, when you get deep into the shot clock, and he makes everybody else better. That's great for Donovan Mitchell, who's going to be a great player almost regardless of who his running mate is at the guard position. But I think what you're seeing with Harden is he's making the bigs on Cleveland. He's going to make them much better. Jarrett Allen, who's oftentimes a single-digit scorer, has scored in the high 20s in the 2 games that Harden plays, because all he has to do is set a screen for Harden, who's fantastic out of the pick and roll to the basket, and Harden's going to put it on target on time for a big guy like that to finish. So Harden's A+. I really like the acquisition of Dosunmu from Chicago for Minnesota. As I mentioned earlier, we're going to talk with Alan Horton about that acquisition. A big gap in the Timberwolves' lack of depth, but also lack of true point guard play. I think I would give that an A. Alvarado, I'll tell you what, you want to watch a fun guy to watch. He is fantastic. He plays for the New York Knicks. Jose Alvarado, he is from New York. He plays like a New Yorker, the stereotypic New Yorker, tough, gritty, hard-nosed, fearless, in your face. Great running mate alongside Jalen Brunson, and also a great player to bring in for Brunson, where you don't have the big drop-off that the Knicks have struggled with when Brunson's been out of the rotation. So Alvarado's great. Zubac, I really like him in Boston. I don't think they've quite maximized him yet, but the thought of Zubac being with the Celtics, who have, as well as the Raptors have done, I would have to say that the Celtics' performance has been I would say an even higher level of surprise than the Raptors, because with Jason Tatum, former MVP, out of the lineup for the year with his Achilles rupture, I don't think anybody expected this from the Celtics. And now with Zubac and the rumors now that Tatum may very well be ready and be back before the end of the season, or at least for playoffs, if that happens, that looks like a real nice trade as well.
It's all looking very good. And
I love those mid-season shakeups, by the way.
Oh yeah, they're great.
Yeah, they're just change the way it changes dynamics amongst the team. So very, very interesting. So been fun to watch, honestly.
Yeah. All right, over to number 2, Chris Paul. He's officially retired. Raptors waive him about 20 minutes later. Him and the other 29 teams in the NBA decided, nope, it's time to hang them up. Is he in the top 5 of all-time great players to not win a championship?
No, I have to be transparent on this. I stole this from NBA radio on my way in to the station today. And the reason I did is I thought it was a compelling question, because Chris Paul's career, for me, is polarizing. Unbelievable. 21 years, unbelievable. Sounds like he's the kind of guy that is an acquired taste, even though he's been the president, the player rep, president for the NBA Players Association. So he has tremendous leadership qualities in his personality, both as a player and as a person. But he also has a reputation about being difficult to get along with. Be that as it may. Fantastic career, but never was able to take any team that he played on to the promised land, sometimes because of injury, sometimes because, quite honestly, Chris Paul, small in stature, could really be isolated on defense. And as great as he was, he wasn't as great as I think a lot of other people that I would put well ahead of him. I would say he's in the top 15. But when you look at players like Charles Barkley, Patrick Ewing, Karl Malone, and then you start building your list out of players that I think had much more impactful careers, that I would put him top 15, definitely. But I'm not the Chris Paul fan that a lot of people are about how great he was. I thought he was really, really good. But would I take, John Stockton, would you pick, who would you take? Would you take John Stockton or Chris Paul if you were putting your team together, both of them at their peak, Josh?
Yeah, no, so it's an interesting question. We actually brought this up after Chris Paul retired earlier this week. I think I personally would.
You would take Chris Paul over Stockton?
Strong defender. I also got to watch him play. I know everything about John Stockton. He leads the NBA all time in assists, but he could also pass it down to Karl Malone. He'd dribble for 9 seconds, and then he would put up, get a basket, and then he got an assist. So it's a little bit, but nonetheless.
Now this is from a hockey guy.
Whoa.
The hockey assist is one of the most
the secondary assist is dumb.
The most perplexing point when a guy passes it up. The secondary assist just baffles me.
Listen, I don't ask me to explain the hockey assist.
But I will correct you on one thing. At the time Stockton played, that was not the case for an assist. They have liberalized the assist rules in the time since Stockton retired. At the time, Stockton and Malone were a tandem. I forget what it was, but it might have been one dribble.
Ooh, interesting.
Might have been two. So it was not. I don't think it's how you're portraying it. I think it was much simpler, much more direct, like what I would call a true assist.
Way to call me on it.
Yeah.
All right. Well, let's go over to number 3. Jazz and the Pacers both fined for tanking. Jazz $500,000, Pacers $100,000. How should the NBA address this?
Well, I think it was a knee-jerk reaction on the part of Adam Silver. I think he's trying to send a message out to these teams that it's way too early to tank. And in fairness to Silver, the Utah Jazz have come up with quite a creative formula where they feel like they found the loophole and the way to beat the letter of the law, but still be honoring. And honor is not the right word, but still they found a way. I think they found a way to tank without breaking the letter of the law. And that is by playing your stars for the first 3 quarters and then in the last quarter, regardless of the score, putting your bench in. This is an interesting dilemma to me. Like I said, Silver sending a message. If this continues, I think the fines are going to get stiffer. There might be suspensions. Who knows? Because it is a horrible reflection on the NBA. This is where tanking and draft positioning and your future vision for your team all come into play in a league that pays people outrageous amounts of money, where the expectation rightfully should be by the fans, your customers, your viewers, to have the best efforts and the best players on the court every night. And that, whether you have 8 wins or 80 wins, it doesn't matter. To the paying public, it should be the same. That's what is owed. To me, that's the contract of turning on the TV, paying for your subscription to watch the games, or more importantly, paying for the tickets, which are very, very expensive, and going to the games. But on the flip side, you put in these restrictive covenants to make sure teams aren't tanking, but you open the door for this. So it's going to be interesting to see how that unfolds. I don't disagree with what Silver did, but I can understand what the Angels are doing in Utah and what the Pacers are doing too, because the draft coming up is a critical draft for so many teams because the talent pool is so deep.
Yeah, and also, I think the Jazz, hey guys, you've been bad for what's the anniversary on the Gobert trade now? 4 years ago?
Yeah.
You've been bad for 4 years. You've been rebuilding, and whoops, Danny Ainge is a good GM. He drafted good players. And then you traded for Jaren Jackson Jr., who only makes your team better, and now you're like, okay, this year, then we're done. It's like when you're looking at Halloween candy, you're like, okay, just have one more tonight, and then I'm done. It's like, you built a good team, and now you're like, oh man, I can't believe we built a good team. How could we do this to ourselves going into this draft?
Yeah, what do we have to do to compete for one of the top picks in this draft? And because we made ourselves better, we've got to come up with a new strategy. I couldn't agree with you more.
Exactly. And then, I don't know. I think, honestly, if this continues, it has to get harsher. We were figuring out punishments for this or whatever. I said affect their draft odds. If you're actively tanking and in the way that the Jazz are, it's like you got to take away something that they really want, because the Jazz are valued at $4 billion. $500,000 is the equivalent of me giving you a dime right now and being like, there you go, Paul.
100%.
Treat yourself.
100%.
Anyways.
We're going to take the +1, and we're going to push that into the last hour because we really want to get to Alan Horton right now, Josh.
Works for me.
So we'll take a break right now. You're listening to Hoop City with Paul Sir, Josh Fenwick, on your sports leader, Sports 1440. Alan Horton, the longtime great voice of the Minnesota Timberwolves radio play-by-play. Alan, thanks so much for joining us today.
Hey, how are you?
Doing great. Really excited to have you on. Going into the All-Star break, the Timberwolves made a strategic move that I think for a lot of the long-suffering Timberwolves fans who have been holding their breath a bit about the Wolves being able to find somebody to help out in the guard position. The acquisition was Ayo Dosunmu from the Chicago Bulls. Alan, what are your thoughts on your first impressions about how Dosunmu is going to fit into this rotation for the Wolves?
Yeah, I think Timberwolves fans have every right to be excited because you basically added another sixth man of the year candidate to your bench. Before the trade, it was really all about Naz Reid. And as good as Naz has been, he was accounting for close to 45% of the Wolves bench scoring. That's the highest rate in the league, which really tells you how good he's been, but also the lack of depth the Wolves have had on that bench and having some extra firepower. You add Ayo, who's averaging right what Naz is off the bench. I mean, you've got 2 15-point-a-game scorers now. And with the way Bones Highland is playing, he's become much more consistent. Chris Finch has tried to get him to stack some more good performances, and he's starting to do that. All of a sudden, you have a really solid 8-man rotation with kind of Jalen Clark being that 8.5 to 9th man who's maybe getting 5 to 10 minutes a game and, can certainly still work his way into it. There's still TJ Shannon for the Wolves to turn to. So I think the Wolves have some good options coming off the bench. But as most coaches get towards the end of the season and toward the playoffs, it's shortening the rotation. And Chris Finch likes to be at 8 or 9. And I think he's got a really solid 8 that he feels pretty good about going forward.
Well, and I think you really encapsulated it very well to have 2 15-point scorers coming off the bench. Plus, what I love about Dosunmu is he's long, he's athletic, he can really guard. So he fits into that need that the Wolves have had at the guard position to be able to come in and make a defensive impact on the game as well.
Yeah, he can do a lot of different things. I mean, he's great in transition. He's a good defender. When he's on the floor, it's attack mode. It's transition mode. It's running up the floor. There's only been 3 games with him a part of the lineup, but there was a fast break in one of those 3 games that had Bones and Ayo running together, and that's about as fast as the Wolves that I can remember. The Wolves having 2 players that were that quick and moving the ball up the floor. So it's pretty exciting what he can bring.
That really is. That's that to hear you say it that way and put it into that context, because the Wolves, with all the success they've had in the last 2 seasons in the playoffs and getting to the Western Conference Final, you would never associate those words of that fast, electric, dynamic, fast breaking. The greatness of Ant, yes. Randall's impact on the game, absolutely. McDaniel's continuing to evolve into such an effective player. But now to have that additional dimension from both Bones and Ayo, that's really exciting for the Wolves because, and this is the next question I'd ask you, Alan. There's a comment, there's a description of the Wolves, this is actually mine, and I'm not sure it's accurate, but I'm curious about your thought on it. Inconsistent excellence. Because when they're good, they're really good. But when they're bad, they're perplexing. And so that I think is one of the observations that a lot of people have had about the Wolves this year. Now, I don't think there's really any excuses as long as they're healthy to be as inconsistent as they might have been up to this point.
Yeah, it's funny you bring that up because, Paul, we track a lot of different things during the course of a season when you're doing radio and TV play-by-play. You're looking at home road splits. You're looking at your record versus good teams versus bad teams. You're looking at different lineups, all these different factors, trying to look for trends and storylines. And really what we've learned about this Timberwolves team is that it's pretty simple. I don't think the opponent matters in the sense that if the Wolves play to their potential, they can beat anybody. And if they don't play their potential, it can look really bad and they can lose to anybody. That has been played out because they've beaten Oklahoma City twice. They've beaten San Antonio twice. So they've beaten the 2 best teams in the Western Conference and been right with there toe-to-toe, exchanging blows and winning those games. And then they've had losses to Sacramento. They've had a loss to Utah. They've had a loss to most of the teams towards the bottom of the standings. Memphis is in there as well. So it really is about – it's just another reminder, too, when you play basketball into almost June every year, which the Wolves have done the last 2 years, it's hard to maintain this level of excellence for that period of time. It's it's almost 100 games a year when you include the preseason. It's a grind. I mean, the really great teams can do it. Oklahoma City did last year, but I think we're starting to see that take its toll a little bit. I mean, it's a grind. It's such a grind. And the Wolves aren't one of those great teams. They haven't been to a finals. They haven't won a title. They haven't reached the goal of excellence yet. But they're a really good team. And even for good teams, you're going to have those ups and downs. So they were 20-10 going into Christmas Day at Denver. They lose that game in overtime. They lose 3 out of 4. Then they win 6 out of 7. Then they lose 5 in a row. Then they win 4 straight. Then they lose 3 out of 4. Now they've won 2 in a row. So, that's that inconsistency that you're talking about, the ups and downs, the peaks and valleys, kind of during the dog days of the season when it's tough to get motivated. It's cold. It's dark outside. There are lots of rumors going around about trade deadline coming up. I mean, the Wolves have had to deal with that for the better part of a month, leading into that trade deadline. And then there's all-star voting and that kind of stuff, which I think affected Julius Randle a little bit. So, when you're rumored to pick up a guy like Giannis, it involves almost everybody on your team because almost everybody on your team is bantied about in the package that would go to get Giannis. And I think that really affected the team a lot, depending on the day and depending on what guys had heard, what guys are thinking, how they're feeling, all that kind of stuff. So it's always a good time of year to get past the All-Star break, get dialed in. And Chris Finch has done a really good job. In his 4 full seasons, the Wolves have the 4th best record post All-Star break. So they've been dialed in at the right time of year.
Really well put. And I'm talking to Alan Horton, play-by-play voice of the Minnesota Timberwolves here on Hoop City on Sports 1440. I love that description. Now, of all of the human factors, and I think a lot of times we as fans have a hard time remembering these are still dudes out there playing a game, and all of these different distractions, all of these different influences can affect their performance. I do want to ask you about a couple of players. I love the development of McDaniels, personally. I think if the Wolves will stick with this kid, that what he's going to continue to evolve into 2 years from now, I'm saying 2 years, but it may be sooner than that, may take a little bit longer. But he is evolving to such a diverse talent, and his scoring is becoming more and more consistent. He's becoming deadlier from the outside, and he's becoming craftier on the inside. I just think he's a guy you buy into. When I heard about, when everybody was talking about the rumor of Giannis, and Giannis is an exciting, dynamic player. But man, oh man, I was glad that didn't happen. And I personally hope it doesn't happen in the offseason. Might. Hope, and if it does, great. Hope it works out. But I just am such a believer in McDaniels. And of course, there's other players I want to touch on with you as well. But give me your impressions of the kind of season that McDaniels is having.
I think the Wolves have seen that same thought you had from the very get-go, because he's long, he can defend.
Yeah, he's 6'10".
Yeah, you can see all these attributes that he's got, and Wolves fans have kind of been waiting for a season like this. And sometimes it just takes time. Sometimes you have to be patient. You have to go through the growing pains. Someone just doesn't all of a sudden jump to that level that Jaden is right now, where he's basically a 15-point, 5 rebound, 3 assists, 1 steal, 1 block guy, which is elite company in the league. There's not a lot of guys that are doing that. It's single digits. And even Jaden, with the great season he's had, is still not at that level. I think his steals are a little bit below 1 per game, but and he's guarding the opponent's best player every night. And over the last 2 games, he's just been sensational. Not only offensively, shooting it efficiently, being aggressive, getting out in transition. It looks like he's taken out some frustration on the rim. He's gotten about 5 dunks in the last 2 games, which is the most he's had in a 2-game span this season. And he's also holding opponents to 33% shooting when he's the primary defender over the last 2 games. So he's really given you a glimpse the last 2 games of what he's capable of. Again, I think probably the biggest thing you're looking for is consistency. He has stacked those kind of games together. Oftentimes it's been with a teammate out. Sometimes Ant's been out or someone else has been out of the lineup, and he's kind of stepped up his game. But he's doing this now with everybody healthy, and that's a huge sign. You have to have balance. I think one thing the Wolves learned when they got to the Western Conference Finals last year against OKC was that OKC really didn't defend Rudy Gobert, and they really didn't defend Jaden McDaniels. You can't have if you're going to be successful at that level, you have to have all guys being a threat at the offensive end. And I think the Wolves are a much more dangerous team with the way Jaden's playing and the way they're involving Rudy Gobert this year that makes them more dangerous at that end of the floor.
I love that you point that out about Rudy, because he takes a lot for a guy that's as impactful as he is on the defensive end of the ball. He takes a lot of grief for being what I would call an old school type of center, back to the basket big, not really going to catch the ball and do something with it in a fluent way. But the fact that the Wolves are making that effort consistently, night in and night out, to get him involved so that when the playoffs come, he doesn't have one game where he has 20 and 20, and then the next game he has 4 and 10. To get that kind of consistency is going to make them so much tougher, because you've got all the other weapons around him now, but that puts the pressure on the defense to not be able to just, as you point out, OKC did, forget about him. Talk about Ant and what you continue to see from this marvelous young talent.
Yeah, just up-and-coming player. Every year he gets better and better and more dominant and more dominant. I think I'll use the word consistency again, because Ant has had monster games and it has been dialed in. The team is I just looked back a couple of weeks ago to when OKC came into town. And the Wolves, Paul, have never felt a game in the regular season that was that intense right from the opening tip. And Ant hit a 3 on the Wolves' first offensive possession. I've never heard the arena react on a regular season opening bucket like it was that big. The crowd was that into it. The team was that into it, and they absolutely dominated OKC that night. But that's, Ant wants to get to that next level, right? He wants to be up there with some of the all-time greats, and the name Michael Jordan is always kind of associated with him. And what I think about when those guys were doing their thing is that those guys brought that kind of level every single night. They had that killer mentality, night in, night out, even if it's a Tuesday night against Utah or a Thursday night in February in Charlotte. Michael Jordan wanted to rip your heart out, and just Ant hasn't had that kind of consistent performance at both ends of the floor for 48 minutes. That's a lot to ask. I mean, that's a superstar level, but that's kind of where he's at, right? He's got that talent. We know he can do it against some of the better teams, but he's got to do it on a more consistent basis. And it's part of the reason why the Wolves have struggled in some of the games where their focus has not been there. Their attention to detail has not been there. They lose to New Orleans. They lose to the teams I mentioned earlier, Utah, Memphis, Sacramento. Those are losses that, a handful can be okay during the year. Everybody's going to have those. But I think the Wolves have passed the point where they've gone past the point where it's okay to have 3 or 4 of those, not 7 or 8 of those. And that's kind of been the problem. And I think when you look at those losses, I think Ant leads the way. He's the leader of the team. And I think he's got to accept, he talks about it after the game. He just, I didn't have it. I wasn't there. It was tough to get motivated. And that's got to change if he wants to get to that next level and bring the team along with him.
You use the comparison to Michael Jordan and I think that's a valid one. And I think oftentimes what isn't understood about Jordan is, with all of his physical greatness, with all of his offensive accomplishments and the way that he retooled his game as he aged, all of those things that people talk about often, you hit the key point. He wanted to rip your heart out. And what I remember about Michael Jordan is how he played when he was playing badly. Mm-hmm. He still was on defense. He didn't take a play off, and he didn't take games off or plays off. He didn't show up. He didn't mope. He never dropped his head. He competed in every play, even when he was going 4 for 20 on a particular night. Michael Jordan had those nights where he was dreadful on offense. Not a lot, but what he didn't have was the motivation to win. And I do agree with you. When you watch Ant play, he becomes conditional in certain situations. And I think you make the great point. A couple of times, yeah, but not. There's a pattern here that on certain nights, all of a sudden you just sort of see his effort evaporate and his focus evaporate, and it seems to permeate to the other members of the team.
Yeah, it starts at the defensive end, whereas
Yes.
when he's on ball and dialed in, he can be one of the best on ball defenders in the NBA. It's normally off ball where he's kind of maybe catching his breath, or maybe the attention to the focus isn't quite there, and boom, someone cuts back door, or he's just playing too far off a shooter that you can't allow any space at the 3-point line. So that kind of consistency has to be dialed up. But the good news is that Ant has shown that once you get to the postseason, he can do all that. His numbers start to rise, his intensity rises. But the regular season does matter as long as it is, and as much of a grind as it is. It matters. It matters where you're seated. You don't want to be slipping into that top 6. You want to be a solid top 4. The Wolves would love to have home court advantage in the first round. That's something they haven't had and didn't have last season. So it's all there for Ant, and I think he knows it. The other place it shows up too, I think, is offensively, when he tries to do a little too much one-on-one, 0 pass possessions, coming right up, and we know he can hit the step back 3, and he's a fantastic one-on-one player, but you don't want to rely on that. That's one of the reasons the Wolves have blown out their last 2 opponents. 2 teams they should beat, the Atlanta Hawks and who did we just play? Someone else that was struggling.
Portland?
Portland.
Yeah.
Well, Portland's not bad, but the Wolves played team basketball. They moved the basketball, and guess what? Julius Randle and Anthony Edwards still got their points. Julius had a triple-double last game. Had 41 points. Ant's still getting 30 2 games ago against Atlanta. You play the right way, the basketball gods reward you. Everybody kind of feasts, and those guys can still get their numbers. They don't have to say, you know what, I need to get my points right now. No, if you play the right way, the ball will come back to you, and oftentimes it comes back to you in a better position than you going 1-on-5 and trying to score.
Isn't that the truth? And for great players, that is awfully hard, especially if you've been putting in a lesser effort through the first part of the game, and you're trying to wake yourself up and you're trying to get out of your slumber. Then you start forcing things to try to get going again. But like you said, in this Wolves team, if they play as a team, wow, could they ever be a force to be reckoned with in the Western Conference this year?
Hey, Paul, one other thing. That's the thing, is like you're also trying to change human nature.
Correct.
I think in this day and age, the way guys grow up and play in the AAU circuit, and Ant's always been the best player on his team, his nature is to try to beat the other opponents. He wasn't on a very good Georgia team, so he had to kind of carry that load, and oftentimes had to go one-on-1, 1-on-2, 1-on-3. And so you're trying to this goes for all young, I think, superstars that come up. You're trying to break that habit of trying to do it all yourself. I think the intention is right. The intention is he wants to win. He wants his team to win. But how you go about it, that's the way you're trying to break kind of the mold or the thought process of from young star players, that they don't have to do it all themselves. If you trust the coach, if you trust your teammates, you can achieve greatness, and it doesn't have to be as hard as you'd like to make it.
Those dreaded letters, AAU, that world that's both great and perplexing at the same time.
Yeah.
Alan, it's an absolute pleasure to talk to you again. Thank you for making time today. I know how busy you are. I hope we can talk again before the end of the season. And here's fingers crossed for the Wolves to have a great run post All-Star break, and that they get in that top 4 and have home court for the playoffs when they come.
Yeah, it'd be nice.
That'd be great.
Paul, appreciate it. Thank you.
Likewise. Have a great weekend. Alan Horton, play-by-play voice of the Minnesota Timberwolves, joining us here on Hoop City. When we come back, we're going to talk about Canada's own Toronto Raptors with Ryan Wolstat. Stay tuned. You're listening to Sports 1440. Power of Love, Huey Lewis in the News, one of the great 80s rock love ballads. Speaking of great, we have the great Toronto Raptors reporter from the Toronto Sun joining us right now, Ryan Wolstat. Ryan, welcome to the show. Great to have you on.
Thanks for having me. Sorry about the technical issues. Next time I'll pay the internet bill.
Technology is great when it works, so it's great. But it's most important thing is we have you on right now. All right, Ryan. I guess what I would describe the activity that actually the results of the trade flurry that was going on, that people were all hyped about and talking about what teams were going to do what with whom. The Raptors are one of those teams that made a very, very minor adjustment, bringing in a big, and pretty much it was stated clearly by the Raptors president, Bobby Webster, that they're going to stick with their present crew and ride this through because, as I said in my opening remarks, I think the Raptors' success so far has been beyond expectations. What are your thoughts? Did they do the right thing by sticking to what they have, by adding a big, because the one gaping hole has been Jakob Poeltl's back problems? So did they do the right things by staying the course?
Yeah, I think they were pretty limited in their options. Like they didn't have in past years. They've had sort of some like nice cap ballast, you could say, like a Bruce Brown or Bren Kelly Olynyk. They had different they could use, and like that's how they got like a Brandon Ingram last year. This year they didn't really have Baji, but making like $6 million. So in this day and age, it's hard to like make the contracts work with just one sort of contract. Other than that, they have like really small contracts or really big ones. So they didn't have a lot to work with. So like, I don't want to give them a pass. They could have done more. You could argue if the timing was right, but that definitely like limited their options just in terms of what they could match to make the trades work. So I don't know. Like, I think they realize that like they're having a nice step forward, but they're not really ready to compete yet. So they weren't going to do anything crazy to, like, even if they could find a way to kind of like really power up at this point.
So that's an interesting way to put it. They really weren't ready to do anything crazy to try to power up, because that's been shown many, many times that when organizations make what would be termed desperate moves to try to improve dramatically, it once in a while it works, AKA Kawhi Leonard. But on the flip side, oftentimes it doesn't work, and you end up either going laterally or backward. And the Raptors certainly don't want to go backwards, do they?
No, definitely not. Like they're kind of doing a steady build, and if something like that falls into their lap, I think they're ready. They're always ready to pounce and wanting to pounce on a really star player. I just think there wasn't that level of player out there. Like, no offense to a guy like Domantas Sabonis, but like, he's not that huge of an upgrade. He's not a Giannis level player. He's not a Kawhi level player. He's not even probably the level right below them. He's probably 2 levels below that. And is that really going to get you that far ahead? Like, at this point, not really. Especially with Jakob Poeltl's back sore. Like, you have to trade one pick. Probably you'd need one first to get a guy like Sabonis, and then another first just to get rid of Poeltl because of you don't really know what you're getting with his back. So at this point, it doesn't really make sense to do that. It makes more sense to wait and hope that he, can reestablish his value to the team or maybe to the league even, although I think they preferred it to, hold on to him and just go forward with that. And then, like we talked about on the show before, you have a guy like RJ Barrett who's going to be an expiring contract next year going into the season. Maybe that's how they do something, but it just didn't make sense now with the price to sort of do it. They're just sort of doing their slow build and get back to the playoffs after a bit of an absence this year. Hopefully avoid the play-in, and then the hard thing is trying to find out how do you take that next step after this year, after you get a taste of that playoff action.
Absolutely. Talk to me about what your observations are about when the Raptors are healthy. And I guess we have to put Poeltl out of the equation right now because he just has not been around enough. When he's played well. But taking that out of the equation, but when you have Brandon Ingram, when you have Scotty Barnes, RJ, of course, quickly was Player of the Week a couple of weeks ago in the Eastern Conference. Tell me about how you feel like the pieces of this puzzle are fitting together.
It's tough when you take Poeltl out of the equation because I think he's just such a key piece. He's their best screen setter, probably their best rebounder, best rim defender other than Barnes. And so it's tough. Like, without him, I think they're really undersized. They really don't set good screens. They don't free up the players for good shots. Like, they really lack the physicality, and it really shows against the best teams. They've had a terrible record against the best teams, except for some reason Cleveland. And now with James Harden's a Raptor killer, now he's there. So I think you have to throw out the results against Cleveland. Now they're a new team. So, I think they're doing the best they can with these pieces, but as we talked about before, they just, they have maybe the worst collection of shooting in the NBA. That's a huge issue. They have very little size and strength. That's another huge issue. Like, Colin Murray-Boyles is awesome, especially for a rookie. He's big and strong. He's just going to get bigger and stronger. But right now, he's one of their most physical players, him and Scotty Barnes and Poeltl when he plays. Like, that's not enough. So if you don't have enough size, physicality, shooting, you're going to have one hand tied behind your back. So I think given all those issues, they're doing, way better than anyone could expect. And it's just like, how do you keep doing that against the good teams that you're going to run into when you have these limitations?
Well, let's just stay on Pirtle for just a second. What's the medical update on his recovery? Is this something that it would appear to me this is something that threatens him playing at all this season, or is this a steady recovery mode that he's in, that there is a hopeful outcome where he could come back and be relatively healthy?
This is one of the weirdest injury things I've seen in many years covering the NBA. Like, they really have no idea. I know backs are really tricky. I've had some back stuff in the past, and
sure,
and you never really know. Like, it's just such a weird injury because there's nothing like concrete that you see on an MRI or an X-ray or anything. Like, it's just something wonky, and as we know, with backs, it could pop up anytime. The good news is he's been practicing a few times and said all went well. He played a little bit in the last game before the break, and he was clearly not himself. He was clearly limited. He couldn't really move as much, but I thought he was still one of the better Raptors in that game. If you look at plus minus, he was one of the only ones that was anywhere close to the Pistons, and he definitely seemed to be moving better in the second half as he got more used to it. So I think the hope is, and we talked to him the other day, is just he's going to keep getting his reps. He's not going to totally take the time off. Like, he basically said, my teammates deserve this break. I don't really deserve it because I've been out so long. So he's going to keep working hard, and they just need to hope that the back, he can manage it, and that it just doesn't pop up. He said he's trying to play without worrying about it, just play freely, and as long as he doesn't feel any twinges, then that'll be fine. I mean, we've seen Raptors with these issues in the past. I think Fred VanVleet had a whole season where he was wearing this kind of weird contraption that kind of loosened his back. So they need him to not be bothered by this and to play like the active Pirtle we've seen in the past, because when they've had that Pirtle, they've been a way better team. And like I said off the top, given their lack of size and physicality, they really, really need him to be playing.
I'm talking with Ryan Wolstat. He's with the Toronto Sun, covering the Toronto Raptors here on Hoop City. Murray Boyles, great overachiever. Just physical, like you said. He's a battler, all of that, but he's undersized. So he's not the answer, but would be a great addition to a bigger lineup when Pirtle comes back. Mm-hmm. The guy that I find, and really I shouldn't spend as much time when I have the opportunity to talk with you, but I always have to ask, I just feel like, why can't the Raptors get more out of Grady Dick as a shooter? That just baffles me.
Yeah, as soon as you started saying that, I knew it was going to be him. It is baffling. This guy was a dead-eye shooter at Kansas. Yeah, he had kind of unorthodox form, but there's a lot of guys that had, Matt Bonner had super weird form, and they all went in. So it's baffling that what he's turned into. Like, how the best shooter in his draft looks like one of the worst players in the NBA. And I hate saying it because he's a really nice kid. I enjoy talking to him, and he works really hard. All his teammates love him, but at this point, he's not an NBA player, and they keep throwing him out there, and it's really hurting. That's been a huge reason, is the reserves, when they had Abaji, he was really hurting them. The minutes to Grady Dick, especially when they play him, like, I like Jacoby Walter. He's an interesting role player to me, but when they play those guys together, which I think they've done way too often, like, I think Darko Rajakovic and his staff have done a really great job coaching this year, but one of the things that baffles me is how often they take Barnes and Ingram out, and they play like Walter and Dick at the same time, and it's just, like, it's an issue. They're not good enough together, or they're not good enough apart to be out there as much as they are. So I think that's going to be an interesting thing. Having RJ Barrett back, and, we mentioned Pirtle hopefully staying healthy. I don't think RJ's been as good as he was earlier in the season since he's been back from his latest injury. He's had a couple injuries that have kept him out this year. Now, he needs to be healthy too, because he is also a huge part. But back to Dick, like, I don't understand what has happened to his game. I found, like, even as a rookie, he did a much better job, not just the shooting, but he was billed as a guy who could really move off the ball, and, like, no one expects him to be like a Peja Stojakovic or something like that, but he was supposed to be able to get open. He was supposed to, just find his way on the court, and he just hasn't been doing that at all. And then when you at the defensive end, he's just getting basically destroyed every time. So it's rough. Like, I don't know. It just seems like they're trying to justify all the work they put into him in the draft pick, but at some point you have to make another call.
Well, you do, and sometimes sometimes it just doesn't work for certain players in certain environments. And I'm not saying that Grady Dick could get traded somewhere, because, like, I look at Duncan Robinson from Detroit, now from Detroit. And I go, Grady Dick should be able to be as that kind of player. He should be able to, like, physically, there's no reason he can't be quite almost that effective in my mind. That he can come, like you said, move off the ball. That's not high level math. That's just mental. So I don't, and there, though, I would say the only asterisk I would add to that is what is being done and I'm not second guessing the coaching. I'm just wondering what is being done to try to get this out of Grady Dick, or is this just the fact that Grady Dick right now has lost all his confidence and has lost his way, and given his physical limitations, it just ain't there?
Yeah, it's interesting you brought up Duncan Robinson, because a few of the Raptors reporters and myself, we were talking about that at the Pistons game the other day. Like, we're like, why can't he be this? And like they'd love it if he could even be that level. I know he was supposed to be better originally, but it's just he doesn't free himself up as much. His shot simply isn't as good. He just doesn't seem as smart a player as Robinson, who maximizes everything he has. Like, I think that was a Division III player before he made his way to the NBA. Like, he just kept going up and up. And I don't know, maybe everything went right for Grady Dick too early, and it hasn't panned out now. But yeah, I don't know. It's really weird. I don't know why it's not clicking and what they can do, but I think they're just going to keep throwing him out there, honestly, because I think, like I was saying earlier, they're kind of looking at this as season as house money a little bit, and they're still trying to get more out of these young guys instead of like bringing in veterans or doing whatever. Like, I thought they should have traded. His value potentially sinks even lower, but I don't really know if there was anything out there for him. But kind of hope for the best. He's had good second halves before, and I think they're going to keep throwing him out there and just hope that something eventually. But so far, really not.
We're having a little bit of trouble with our signal right now, Ryan. You're breaking up a little bit. But I have to tell you, though, the maybe the worst decision I've ever seen for a commercial, and it must be successful because it still runs, is Grady Dick shaving. Because it looks like he couldn't grow a peach fuzz mustache. That's got to be the easiest shave in the world. So, Ryan, you still with us?
Yeah, I'm still here. Yeah,
okay.
I agree. It was a weird choice. For sure.
It really was.
Like, I don't know.
A lot of thicker beers out there
over the years, but yeah.
Okay, final question for you. The Raptors now, we head into the stretch run. Eastern Conference, James Harden's with Cleveland. You got Zubac in Boston. It's going to intensify in the Eastern Conference. All the rumors about the possibility of Tatum coming back. I mean, that's far-fetched, of course. That would be one of those things that you can't base any predictions on. How do you see the Raptors being able to compete in the East? Like, if you had to pick today 1 through 10, where would you see the Raptors finishing today if you had to pick a number?
I feel like they will be 6th or 7th.
I'm right on with you there.
The plan. I think they'll be neck and neck for the play-in or just making the playoffs outright. I feel like Orlando is just better than they've shown, and they're better. They should be better than the Raptors. It just hasn't come together. It will. But yeah, I see them in that range where they're really trying to hang on to a playoff spot, but might slip into the play-in. I'd like to see them play the 4-5, Cleveland and them. I think that would be really interesting. Like I said, they have had their number, but now James Harden changes the equation. If Evan Mobley's healthy, I'm not sure how they deal with Jared Allen and Mobley. So I think that would be really fascinating. But yeah, I think they're they're a lesser playoff team in the East. Like, there's the clear-cut guys at the top. They haven't found any way to match up with New York. They got killed by the Pistons the first time. I think it's going to keep happening, especially when the Pistons get some of their good big men back. And, a terrible matchup for them as well. So I think they're kind of, the best of the rest after the maybe 4 teams.
The fact that they're in that best of the rest conversation after some years of real difficulties, that's a great thing to hear. So it's going to be an exciting end of the season for the Toronto Raptors. Ryan, we'll look forward to having you on again. Thanks so much for making time today. Always wonderful to talk to you. Take care, and we'll talk soon.
All right, sounds good. Thanks for having me.
Ryan Wolstat, Toronto Sun, covers the Toronto Raptors. I want you to watch the Raptors because it's great to have a team that's winning games again. Like Ryan said, they have some limitations, but maybe they'll overcome some of those limitations as the season goes on. We're going to take a break right now. Then we're going to have a conversation with Samantha Ringette, our community champion of the week. When we come back, and after that, Milos Prijovic. We're going to talk about the why of the greatness of Serbia in the sport of basketball. You're listening to Hoop City with Paul Sir and Josh Fenwick on your sports leader, Sports 1440.